Hello, my name is John Reynolds. Welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. In this episode, I'm speaking to Donna Ashworth. Donna is a Sunday Times best-selling author and poet, known for her heartfelt and empowering words that resonate deeply with readers and gone viral on social media. Her work often explores themes of love, loss, and the beauty of imperfection, offering inspiration to people navigating life's ups and downs. Her writing fosters a sense of connection and community, making her a popular and relevant voice in contemporary poetry. I can't wait to speak to Donna. Let's get into it. Donna, thank you for joining me.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
I can tell, and I'm really looking forward to this myself. Tell me, who is Donna Ashworth?
Oh, big question. I still think of Donna Ashworth as being a golden retriever, bouncy, ridiculous, often weird, and very complicated mother and friend and wife and poet.
There's a lot there, with a big smile at the end of it.
Yeah.
Take me back to a young Donna, the early kind of who and what inspiration sort of behind your career and life decisions.
I think I was a very complicated child, so who had all of the feelings, all of the time, and a real overthinker. So I would be, outrageously happy and excited and passionate, and then extremely angry and upset and sad, and had far too big thoughts for a small child. It's something I remember, having those philosophical, going down the rabbit hole of wondering what is space and what does forever mean, and well, that can't be true, there has to be something.
But that's curiosity, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a deep way, I get it, but that's like you obviously had a massively natural sense of curiosity and wanting to learn.
And I think wanting to know and constantly having the questions pop into my head and realising that other people don't. I can specifically remember thinking, other people are not feeling all of the feelings that you're feeling all of the time. Other people seem to be sort of cruising along quite, peacefully. And I felt like I was, in one of those pinball machines where I just ping-ponged off everything all the time.
And were you swaying one way more than the other? So if you describe it like a yo-yo, and there's interesting, because I've not had this chat with anyone before, but that's quite similar to how I felt as a kid, almost sort of mature for my age, but also not understanding why I was here, and the questions I had, I wasn't going to learn at school.
Yeah, well, they're not in the curriculum.
Exactly. And let's cover that in a minute. But just, did you find yourself more down than up, or were you just constantly fluctuating?
Constantly fluctuating, and
that's better than being subdued and then a high and then. So you were just.
I think so, but I heard the phrase "too much" an awful lot, and I heard the word "difficult" an awful lot. So I knew that I was tricky. I knew I was a tricky character.
You labelled yourself that?
Well, I heard it. I mean, my mum and dad were absolutely amazing. I didn't hear it from them, but I heard it at school. I heard it in society. And being a redhead at school, I was branded as fiery and, temperamental and difficult. And yet I was a grade A student, and I won all the awards, and I did all the extra stuff and got the extra stars. So I was an overthinker, but an overachiever, constantly striving for more.
That's interesting. So academically, you obviously excelled at school.
Yeah.
But what was missing for you is almost the sort of the mindfulness and the capturing of extracurricular.
Yeah.
How did you address that? When did you sort of almost feel like there was a fulfillment, if you like, of who Donna really wanted to be outside of passing your exams, which is ultimately to get a job?
Yeah.
Whereas that's not what you do now.
No,
so
and
how did you piece that together?
I didn't. I ricocheted around for years and years and years. I mean, I got such great exam results that I could choose the university that I wanted to go to. Went to university, first time away from home, managing, life on my own. I'd worked so hard for so many years to get these results, head down, achieving. And I did not know how to live in society or how to interact when I wasn't in that school environment. So I melted down, and we had someone committed suicide in our halls of residence, and it was on Halloween, And I'll never forget that. That kind of ricocheted through, you know, a lot of my peers at the time, but it started a spiral within me. And within a couple of months, I had left university, but not in the proper way. I had done a midnight flit, you know, because I didn't know how to leave things, and I didn't know how to say, I've hit a wall, or I'm having a nervous breakdown, or I can't cope. So I was struggling with an eating disorder at the time that I didn't know how to deal with. And I was depressed, but I didn't know that either. So
it's really
I
sad.
didn't.
It's awful to hear that, and clearly very lonely at that time, because it's not obvious who to speak to or what to do.
I mean, my mum was brilliant, but when you're away at university, you don't have your mum. So prior to that, we had sort of gone on a self-help journey, and it was difficult to find self-help books in Britain at that time. So we had to order them from America, and it was Louise Hay, How to Heal Your Life, saved my life, because I was very badly anorexic for quite some time. And her affirmations and her way of looking at things and retraining your thoughts was the basis of the healing that happened for me. But it took a very long time, because you also have to live. You have to get a job. You have to go out into the world. So you can't sort of say, I'll just take a year out and heal, because that thought wasn't a thing then. Nobody was thinking like that then. I think it's probably more doable now.
Oh, it's a different world. I mean, I don't mind admitting I've just turned 47, so to give perspective, Tony Robbins was the only person I ever heard about that was in that kind of self-development mindset, and it was a bit woo-woo to me, because the British side of things is kind of man up, and you don't need any of that. Just come on, you know, give it your best shot, and so on. And
just so damaging.
whereas the book that you literally said saved your life, she was ahead of her time for where we were then. There's a huge amount of people doing that now, and understanding of that. But of course, what we now have to deal with is social media. When I say deal with, that's sort of almost the muddying of the waters of authenticity. And one of the things that I crave and couldn't wait to talk to you today, that ripples through, you know, and coming from you now, is authenticity. And would you say, that's an absolute pleasure, would you say that clearly the reason why you, and I'm jumping forward a bit, we'll kind of go back potentially to some of what we're talking about, but sitting here now, the authenticity is what has got you such a huge following. And with so many influencer-led potentially, and sort of misrepresentation that goes on in the social media side of things, would you say that by having this journey you've gone on to find yourself, to then flourish, is what everyone else is now even subconsciously craving? Real people, real information.
Yes, and see, I don't really have the same thoughts about social media as people seem to think it's an issue. I think it's the opposite. I think if you're in the practice of training your thoughts and retraining your habit, then you retrain your social media to deliver what you need to you. And the algorithm, the gods of social media, are brilliant in that capacity. If you start liking pages that are delivering really authentic messages on a daily basis, they will flood you with more.
That's really interesting.
If you start blocking the ones that are bringing you down or selling you, you know, a story that you know isn't true, then you don't get any more of those. So to me, it is black and white, that you can train your brain, you can train your habits, and you can train your social media to work for you. What we have now with social media that we didn't have back then, and I could desperately have used, is a place to find like-minded people going through things that you're going through. You can do that in an hour on social media. You can find another 17-year-old anorexic teenager who feels exactly like you, and suddenly you're not alone. And the power in that is endless, because I didn't know anybody, and there was no support groups, you know. And I live in Scotland in a village. You would have to travel miles to get access to other people who might be in the same situation as you. So I can only see the wonders of social media. It's how we use it that needs to be trained and worried about, rather than should we use it.
I mean, it's clearly the person that you are, number one poet in the UK from a actual accreditation point of view, best-selling author. Of course you're going to articulate it incredibly well, but I've never heard anyone say like that. And Stephen Fry, in a slightly different conversation, but still
Who
related
I
to social
adore.
media, he's incredible, and he articulated the algorithm of negativity.
Yeah.
But what you've just really hit home for me there is that it's how we use it and how we
use
educate
it.
ourselves and how we shape it is
Yeah.
actually in our control.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to go that route of social media being negative and a negative tool. It's like the knife, you can cut the butter with it or you can stab someone with it. You know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And you use it for so much positive good.
Yeah.
And that's also formed an amazing community of people. In fact, I loved the fact that Kelsey Parker, who filmed just before, instantly it was like, actually, you guys knew each other, and she's sharing your poems because of, and let's talk about that from a grief point of view. You write about some really deep emotions, but actually you uplift people, you give people hope. Did you set out to do that?
100%. I just think if you wanted to go and see a friend who was struggling, you would go and see that friend, you would do your very best to see a little chink of light come into their eyes, just a tiny little raise in their spirits. You would not leave until you had achieved that objective. So if you're going to go into the painful parts in poetry or quotes, you have to bring people back up out again with either a little bit of hope or some comfort or a perspective they can take away, and that seed will then prosper and grow. And
that's
who
habit
knows?
forming, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's the really important thing, isn't it? It's not a one-off or a week of doing something. It is literally, and it's a constant. You've got to stay present with it, right?
You have. And it's a daily habit of seeking light. And I've had to seek light my entire life to stay above water. I'm not brimming with it. I'm not going, I'm a sunshiny person, let me share it with you.
Isn't it refreshing to hear you say that, right? Because you look at you now, you're radiating.
But it's all deliberate, it's not inauthentic. It's a habit that I've used to save myself. If you look for light, you find light. If you look for negativity and dark, you're absolutely going to find it. What you seek, you find every minute of every hour of every day. This we know. So it's a very deliberate thing that I do to keep my head above, water, to keep me on the sunny side of the street, quite literally, and not sink into the abyss of the world is hopeless, and every day you wake up there is a new disaster and a new war for overthinkers and catastrophizers to, feast on. That's who I am. So I just think we have popcorn brains now because of social media. So tiny bite-sized chunks, this is how we consume information. And I wanted to provide popcorn bites that would balance all of the negative and the constant barrage of every single act that is hideous in this world we hear about. And we were never supposed to hear about the whole world's sorrow. We were supposed to hear about our village, or somebody in the next village had, a terrible time. But now we know everything, all of the negatives, and we can't process that. It's not good for us. So we need to balance it with how do we process it, and what can I look at, what can I read to balance it. And so I went on a little mission of trying to, provide these bite-sized chunks. When you're overwhelmed, you can't read.
And
you
we've
can't
all got
read.
short attention spans. I mean, you and I, our attention span has shortened. The kids coming through, I'm a dad to 13 and 14-year-olds. If I haven't got their attention with something I'm showing them or talking to them about, they've switched off so quickly. So it's really smart what you've done.
And instead of moaning about that and saying, our attention spans are not what they used to be, let's just evolve to deal with it and move on and see what comes out.
Don't fight the system. It's not going to change.
Everything changes, and there will be a different thing that we're all moaning about in 20 years. But at the moment, it's smartphones and constant need to be looking at something, and that is a problem. But it depends what you're looking at.
Definitely, and actually moving with the times, embracing change, brings up perfectly the kind of poetry that you're best known for. And to me, and we talked about this pre-filming, I loved English at school. I loved storytelling, creative writing, and I loved consuming. Rudyard Kipling, I must have read it a few hundred times.
Beautiful piece.
And I was brought up on this stuff, and I think it creates stimulation, it stimulates creativity. So that, but poetry itself, for me, and you would have a better perspective on this, felt like it was a sort of a dying form, not talked about so much. Kids aren't talking about, like, they're not coming home learning poetry like I did and so on. But it feels like you have, with this kind of popcorn culture and having people like Davina McCall, Kelsey, who we just talked
Yeah.
about, who are feeding off this, and they need it, they want to share it. And it feels like that's becoming, I don't want to say cool, but relevant, that's the word.
Yeah.
And it feels like you have been massively part of stimulating that.
I mean, it's when I look back at it, I can't quite believe what's played out. I was just sort of sitting there at the right place at the right time when the pandemic hit, and I think this has all come out of the pandemic. You know, after every war, there comes the war poets and the war poetry, and it's about a collective consciousness experiencing something together. We were all in it together, so we're going to
Form
have
that community.
Yeah.
We all became part of the same tribe, right?
We did, and then, you know, the kids are coming out with mental health issues that people think they might not have had before, and it's changed the way their brains developed in those years, which it absolutely would have. Of course it would have. So we're now in the aftermath of that. We needed hope at the time, and I decided I would provide that. I thought it'll save me on a daily basis if I can.
So selfishly, as well as helping everyone else, amazing purpose.
Everything that I share helps me. It's maybe not always my lived experience, because I will process what other people are sharing with me, or things that I have felt. You know, we use the word empath in many ways in this society. Sometimes I think it's overused, but the grief that is not ours, I've always struggled with. I've always felt grief for people that I shouldn't have, because I wasn't close enough to. Or maybe they're even famous people that I've never met, or strangers on the news. But nonetheless, that is grief that needs to be processed. And we are told, well, you know, what are you getting upset for? Did you know that person? As though, you know, to be ashamed of that emotion that you felt because you're not close enough in line to experience that. So, you know, all of these emotions that in Britain we were always told to push down. I always wanted a chin. I always wanted to be stoic, graceful, and you know, you never know when she's upset, because I'm as transparent as get out. And then what's actually been my success in the end is how transparent I am, and how much I feel the things that I'm not supposed to feel. And what I just want to normalise is that everybody feels everything all of the time in a way. And recognising each of those feelings as a visitor will save your life, rather than thinking, I am this now, I own this now, I must be a sad person, I must be a melancholy person, or I'm weird, or you know, you're none of these things. These are just what's visiting you at the moment. And other cultures are good at using the language to say, sadness is upon you. We say, oh, she's sad. You've become it. No, it's on you. It's passing through you. You know, but we tend to sort of believe that's us then.
Identity.
And then you're under. You can be overwhelmed by
Is that something that you know you need to deal with quite quickly? So like you almost form that identity that, you know, this is who I am now, and or, you know, my point being that we can then be consumed by overthink and allow it to almost like an ivy kind of.
It's got you.
And you've got to break through.
It's got you if you
Yes.
if you
So
if
what
you
you're
attach possessive to it. You know, my illness, my depression, it's
You've labelled yourself.
It's got you, is the way that I see it. Instead of you saying, you know, this is a phase that I'm in, or this is how I'm feeling, or this is what I'm going through. And that could change in a month, you know, it could be entirely different. And I think that very simple shift can be the saving.
When you started writing, and that almost sort of ridiculous timing that happened with COVID, that then the world almost stopped, right? And it's almost like that was when people went back to the roots of I need to find more meaning, and you know, why are we here, and how's this happening, and I have time. And it's almost like that zeitgeist timing all happened at once, where people found you and you were putting out content that resonated with people. You were doing it for yourself, to get yourself through time. Did you ever actually have the thoughts that this is something I could make a career out of?
No, I knew it was helping people, and I loved that, because, you know, the shared experience of that, the exchange, the emotional exchange, we were talking about it earlier, it charges me, you know, knowing that other people are seeing that perspective, or feeling that hope, or getting that comfort. You know, it's a constant cycle of positivity. But I didn't see it as a career, because I'm just a mum of two, who my husband and I owned a play centre. And of course, it was the first thing to shut down.
I read this about you.
Yeah, so we were first to shut down.
You moved so quickly. This is the thing. This is just using that. I used that example of Ivy on something. You knew that okay, that's a chapter over. I need to. Whereas some people might have fought or disappeared. It's gone. Oh no, this didn't work. How annoying! You moved so quickly.
My husband wanted to cling on to it, so I'm a real. I realised quite early on that life is change, you know, and I like certain things to remain the same, but that can become the fear that cages you rather than the fear that protects you. So I've worked on it for decades that, you know, you must welcome in the change, you must be ready when it comes. You can feel it when it's calling for you, you know when it's bigger than you and it's time. So I was very sort of decisive, no, we won't wait until they shut us down, this is not safe. And we gave away all of the food and we drove it around the local areas because, do you remember when we couldn't buy milk? And there was no toilet roll and people couldn't get pasta and people who were gluten-free couldn't get gluten-free pasta because people who missed their pasta had bought all the gluten-free pasta and
bought all the shelves.
It was just a mess. So I remember driving round giving out milk to people, old people and mums who were breastfeeding and they needed milk, you know, and it was just such a crazy time. I remember thinking nothing will ever be the same again. And I'm so dramatic like that, you know. But at the same time, I also see the weight of something and I go with it, I'm moved by it. So I didn't ever see it as a career until about halfway through the pandemic, maybe in June, when somebody said to me, you should put these poems in a book, a pandemic poetry book, and it will remind us all of what went on. And I had some followers by this point and I said to them all, will you buy it if I put a book out, self-publish? And they said, yes, we'll buy it. And they did buy it. Brilliant. And 3 months later, I brought out another book, which was all of the normal poems that I had been building up. And, you know, that's still selling thousands of copies today.
Congratulations, yeah.
Thank you.
Best-selling author. I mean, creativity there and inspiration fueled by the community, these people saying we'll buy a book, and then clearly countless people have now bought the book. Where do you get your continuation of stimulation and ideas, right? And do you ever experience that kind of writer's block element? Because it's so much of what's coming from you is from that lived experience or drawing on, as you say, on other people's, but you know, do you feel like you've just got a bottomless pit because you're dealing with so much that is real life?
Life, every day. It's
so
everyday
you've got
words,
a constant stimulation,
so there's no end.
Brilliant.
And even today, I'll go away from today, well, especially today, because of the experience I've had in the last hour, just meeting people out there, and the chat that we've had will kick off another 100
So I might be in
things.
the book in the future. Come on.
And that's what I'm always saying to my followers, because I do a lot of events now, and I get to meet people, and this is wonderful. And I get to hear from them, but more importantly, I get to stand next to them, and I'm a big energy person. And, you know, there's a lot of woo-woo to this, but there's a lot of science to it as well. We radiate our energy field. It's like 3 feet around us. So, you know, we are kind of touching right now. We've been stood in each other's energy out there. You are quite literally in other people's energy. Of course it's going to affect you. Of course you're going to pick up on what's buzzing about their energy. So I'm a big energy person, and I keep saying to them, this will come back out into the words at some point in the future. So watch out for it, because I haven't gone through all of the various ways that people can grieve in this life, of which there are millions, and no two griefs are the same.
It's really
just like a
important
fingerprint, I couldn't draw your fingerprint if somebody said, you know, have a guess, and nor could I draw your grief, because your lived experience of it and the way that your brain processes it and your physical experience of that brain processing will be entirely different. And grief is the one thing that nobody wants you to talk about. They don't want you to read the poems on radio because it will bring the mood down. And Kelsey and I were chatting and saying, there is no need to bring the mood down. We can laugh and cry in the same 10-minute period, and it should be far more talked about and accepted. And it's all right if somebody dissolves into tears. We can make them laugh once we've been through that and showed care and, you know, come together.
Is that why people don't talk about it? Because And it
They're
goes back
afraid.
to they're afraid of showing that raw emotion.
Or saying the wrong
and
thing,
cry, or
setting it off. Maybe I'll remind them of the person that they've lost as though they've forgotten. You can't make it worse.
No, yes, and the whole like losing emotion, right? People
Yeah.
have not wanted to cry in front of each
Stiff
other for
upper
too
lip.
long, right? Which is very British.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Kelsey was saying, you know, people were crossing the street that knew her fresh after Tom had died, because they didn't know what to say. And she wanted to talk to them because that was her way of processing grief. Is there a particular poem that you have written that, for whatever reason, because as you say, grief's different for everyone, is there a particular poem that's really resonated with people, that has been shared the most, if you like?
A grief poem,
Yeah.
It would be Love Came First, and I think I'm all about the perspectives, so you can't put all people grieving into one poem because it's so specific, but there is one element of everybody's grief that is entirely the same, and you are grieving because love came first. Grief came to you because love came first, and that little perspective shift can be enough to turn the grief from being very destructive on that particular day, hour, minute, to come back to back to the love that all grief comes from. Everybody knows that, they loved that person, but just remembering that grief came to you because love came first, it can, I'm told, be very powerful, the right words at the right time. So that little passage is definitely the most shared and used being the word that I'm all about. I wanted poetry to be used, not on National Poetry Day or in English for poetry lessons.
It's a coping mechanism tool, right? A
daily
daily
words,
tool.
Daily pages, 1 page a day, and what can it achieve?
Yeah, and you're doing that. This is the thing, that hence the relevance, right? Whereas for me, poetry would be, now where's that book in the bookshelf? And it's a bit, blow the dust
when
off.
somebody needs a grief poem, it was the same grief poems we've been using for 100 years.
Yeah, so you've affected change
And
there.
they don't all suit everyone.
No.
We've moved on, we changed the way we talk, and it doesn't always fit, so I wanted to make that easier for people who were grieving.
I'm just imagining people watching, listening, who aspire to be able to be as creative as you. And we just covered the fact that you have got that pot of life that feeds in. You're never going to run out of inspiration and stimulation. But if I was an aspiring poet and writer, and I wanted to try and get my feelings out, and I wanted to express my emotions, and where would I start? And that's a bit of a harsh question to you, but it's more of a kind of, is there a way of just writing things down and a method that could allow someone to develop their own hobby, if you like, that could lead to something else?
I mean, my top advice for it is just start. Don't spend all that time thinking about how you can start. Put pen to paper, get your phone out, get your iPad out, write something, then write another thing, and then let it come out. Don't be put off by every poem's been done, every topic has been covered. No two people will have the same perspective. I can write something, I can give you a prompt. I just wrote a poem live in Waterstones for National Poetry Day, and they sent through all the prompts, and the prompt that I picked was pumpkin spice, because people who like pumpkin spice can get a lot of stick on social media. Oh, here they go, the pumpkin spice brigade, But these people are actually seeking light. When light is fading, when summer is leaving, they're going, okay, summer is gone. I'm not going to get down and upset. I'm going to look to autumn. What joy can I find? What can I get excited about? What can I do to constantly, bring that positivity in? So that was what I wrote in Waterstones. But somebody else would take that prompt and write, it might even be very similar, but it will be different. It will be them. And that differentiation.
There's no right or wrong, right?
And it's so important, because we could send it out to 100 people, and 10 people will connect with one and 10 will connect with the other, and there's no method for that. So do not be put off by so many people are already doing it. What could I have to say that's different? Everything that you say will be different if you let yourself say it and don't censor or try to be like anybody else or judge yourself as you're doing it.
Amazing advice.
Judgment out.
Judgment, yeah, totally. Did you say you did a poem live in Waterstone.
Yeah.
So if I said to you now...
Don't do that.
Oh, okay.
I've switched it off now.
Oh, yeah, you should? It's a constant, isn't it? But I'm going to put you on the spot. So
it's not how I normally work. So the inspiration comes to me, the poem's done.
I'm not going to put you on the spot. That would be really cruel. But if I had, would that part of your brain kicked in and gone? And so let's say it was over the last hour's experience of the conversations you've been finding out about Jack, JAQ, the mental health social media platform, Kelsey, me. Would you instantly spin that into the mixing pot? And
absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a skill.
And the one that would come out today is, nothing random is ever random. These connections that you make, and then they're suddenly in real life, there they are, these people that you've connected with on a deep level, and suddenly they're in front of you. That's not random. You sort of choosing the people that you've chosen today may have been a random selection, but it isn't. You chose us all for very specific reasons, and that brought everybody together.
So true.
You've literally created that melting pot that you speak of. And it's absolutely fantastic. But normally I can feel the sort of poem, which I'm told is very unusual. Recently, in the last few weeks, I've been asked many times, how do you write? And I don't sort of sit down and think, right, I'm going to write. I wait until it's almost delivered, and then I pop it down. And that can be at any time of the day or...
And just tapping into that, so where are you when you're coming up with this? Because it feels like this is happening all the time. Do you have a journal on you all the time when you're writing down?
I use my phone.
Do you go out to have a walk? Or is there a place in your house or somewhere where, you know what I mean? Or is it just constant where you just...
It's wherever I stand. But I will go and get my iPad, and it's funny because when we were taking a picture at Waterstones, I got a pad and pen out because I had a suit on today and I had my iPad and I felt very corporate. This did not feel very sort of poetic and mental health at all. But my iPad to me it's like opening up a magic portal to goodness knows what, I don't know. Every book's been written on that iPad. Every poem has been put down on that iPad. So the whole sort of resonance, the opening that screen and here we go, to me feels almost magical. That's just how I do it.
Do you know something I'm really picking up from you as well is there's a relationship that you've probably got with failure, and failure is such a strong word, but things that haven't worked out, it doesn't feel like anything could actually fail with what you're doing. I don't mean in an arrogant way.
Yeah.
Everything comes from the heart and the head and the mixing pot that produces something. And if people don't share it or appreciate it, it doesn't matter because it's part of your creativity. And then really it's almost like an ever-growing sweet shop where people go, oh, that worked, that worked. And it might be in 3 years' time, a poem you actually written that meant so much to you at the time, someone else grabs it. And then this is where it might be shared on social media. Have I got that right? So you're not actually challenging yourself to
write a bestseller or create the poem.
And you've got these accolades. You've got kind of #1 bestseller, UK's top poet, and so on. How much does that really mean to you? And sitting here now, what is your definition of success?
Success to me is how healthy and calm your nervous system is. Because if you are running on adrenaline, doing what you're doing, it's not a success. It can't be maintained. It's not sustainable. If you're doing something that charges you back as you're doing it, making your own energy as you go along, then that's successful. The accolades and so on have been brilliant for me because I have been an internet author. It's hard to get into bookshops. So every time I get
you almost reverse engineered it.
Yes, well I self-published my first 3 on Amazon, and that's, but there's no other way. If you can't get a publishing deal if you don't have something to show that is going to be, desired.
Proved concept.
I would recommend to anybody to just go out and do self-publish and then see what you think, and then you can approach people. And I'm always advising people to do that. But the accolades are brilliant because they open doors and they help with your imposter syndrome. But your imposter syndrome
from others,
But that's your own thing to sort through, because I know that no matter how successful people get, that never goes away unless you make it go away. You have to do that yourself. It's about sort of figuring out what you want out of the success. What are you getting out of it? I enjoy making books. I absolutely love meeting people through that. you know, that we get straight into the nitty-gritty at my events. People come up and they say, I said I wouldn't cry, and they're already crying. And I said, well, why wouldn't you? We've been sharing deep conversations online for years. We're straight through the first few layers of how are you, and I love your dress. We say all that anyway, but we're straight into the, you know, I used your book when I didn't think I was going to make it through another day. And so
that's success right there.
To me,
you just
that's
affected
the why.
someone else's life for the better.
That's the why. And as long as you're focused on that, and not the figures and the numbers, you have to look at those. It's not practical to not.
And I have got that in spades, and I think your community, your passionate followers and anyone reading your poems will get that. But I want to flip it into the question of, is there an accolade? Is there something in the world of writing that would be awesome to aspire to and have?
I didn't even know what it meant when they said you're on the Sunday Times list the first time. I went, what do you mean? You're a Sunday Times bestseller. I hadn't even put that on my vision board because it didn't occur to me that you could come the way through that I've come and become a Sunday Times bestseller.
I love that though.
And so that took me a few weeks to go, oh, I didn't even know. And then now 3 of my books have done it. And
so it was a nice to have. It wasn't a North Star.
Oh, I mentioned it a lot.
Of course.
Because why wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
I said to all my followers,
look
at what we've done.
You didn't set out to achieve it, is what I mean. When you first started writing, it wasn't like this could be that's what I love about that.
I wanted to be useful.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be used, and selling books is important because if you don't sell books, you're no longer useful, you can't continue to do it. If everybody stopped buying my books, I can't do another book.
No.
So that drive to sell books is there. You know, I'm always promoting my books and saying, you know, this, if you want this, if this appeals to you, here is the book that it came from. Because that is all part of the machine and the cycle that will make it continue. And there's much work to be done in this sector of mental health and reprogramming and daily habits. Not just from people who are experts, you know, and trained, but from everyday people who, you know, I was 45. 44 when the pandemic hit, and I think women especially think that when you've had kids and you're a certain age, you've kind of done what you've done. And it was really important to me to say, well, maybe you could do something else, and if I can do something else, maybe you can do something else, and why not?
That's
you don't have to be invited.
That's entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And I think that's also really a really important message for people to hear, right? Because we can always change. I mean, I'm 47 now, actually just turned 47, and I wasn't doing this 2 years ago.
What were you doing?
Oh, God, you don't want to know. Lots of things. Serial entrepreneur. Property investment and development's been a big part of my journey. But, you know, the point you're making, and I think this is where we're very similar, is pivoting, not allowing myself, and I did actually for too long in property, but I was always doing other things, but not enough to be stimulated in different ways. And I think actually flipping that back to, you've kind of covered it in some of how we've been talking, but just going back to a young Donna growing up and sort of relating that to potentially an aspirational, whether they're a teenage, early 20s aspiring author, or potentially someone that could be at a crossroads in their life and wants to, what advice would you give them?
I think everybody knows what it is that they like to do, what they're good at, what fuels them. But we're all very afraid of that can't work. I can't possibly create a career out of that or make a life out of that. You have to be invited in. It's only for special people. It's, you know, it's only for the few. And I think if you don't give that a shot in some capacity, you will always have that press between the two parts of you that are trying to make money and trying to do the right thing in life, and the other part of you that's going, but we've got really quite a lot to bring in this area. And it's difficult, I know, you know, but there are people out there doing every single thing that you can think of that people are going, I can't do that, it's not practical. Well, somebody's doing it. There are ways, and it's all fear, you know, and the fear is something that was instilled in us as children. And I mean, a necessary amount of fear is healthy, because you can't go out expecting to be able to feed yourself and put a roof over your head if you're not thinking, you know, carefully about what you need to do. But fear is there to protect you, not to stop you. And, you know, and again, making these dissections between the different kinds of fear that are built up within us is huge. So everybody has that thing that they can do to get one step closer to feeling that creative side of themselves.
And believing in, I think it starts with a belief, passion, as you said, and then breaking out of that whole, you sort of, you know, the whole like almost education curriculum that says you've got to go and get a job and so on, actually back yourself.
And of
Which
course
is what you
the
did,
job
right? You
takes
backed
all your
yourself.
energy.
Yeah.
And it was difficult, you know, I didn't put my name to my poetry for a long time. Because I was ashamed or embarrassed, and if it didn't get shared immediately very quickly, I would just delete it. You know, I went through that whole process of, and still to this day, imposter syndrome is something I fight off constantly. But I think everybody does, in the minute that you realise that everybody in the room has it to some level at some point, it makes it a lot less scary. Shining light on anything dark immediately makes it less scary. You know, like the pile of clothes in the corner of your room in the dark looks like a human coming through. You put the light on it, it's on my jacket. And it's the same for everything in your mind. If you keep it in the dark, there it stays.
And actually it can fester as well, it can become a problem,
festers,
right? It can start
horribly.
to get really scared.
And then it goes into your nervous system and it becomes your illnesses, and you know, it holds you back physically as well as mentally. So the more we talk, doesn't matter what you say, but the more we talk, we get closer to getting these little, oh well, sometimes I think, and you say it out loud, the power that you've given to yourself by getting these little things out and saying them out loud to another human is huge. And then I think once you start that, there is a great unravelling. You're no longer in control of that unravelling. I started unmasking, so I have masked my entire life, tried to be somebody else, tried to hold it all together. Oh, she's so busy, don't know how she does it. Well, I have a meltdown every night when I get home is how I do it.
It's important for people to know that though, right?
Yeah,
because
not
without
anymore.
you even trying to, like this is the raw you, right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And there's an element of, if you read the headline that goes before it, #1 Sunday Times bestseller,
Yes.
But people then can actually know that you are just like them and having to
I'm
deal
not
with your
gracefully
emotions.
floating around on a cloud of positivity and wisdom.
I mean, it's a big why
It's
for
hard
me.
won.
Yes. I get
It's
it.
mind at the coalface, you know, this wisdom. And we all have the wisdom. That's why you share a poem, because you read it and you recognise that. You knew that, but you'd forgotten it. Life had taken it from you. You were too busy.
Or you allowed them to consume it in a way that there was a blockage, maybe a fear from that person reading, and then you open that up through the creativity and the skill.
Exactly. So it's your wisdom is, if you read that and that hit you, it's because you knew it, really. You recognised it, you know, you connected with it. So the wisdom is yours as well. So I'm very, you know, careful to tell people, don't think for 1 minute that, you know, I'm this poetic cloud of light, but it's the opposite. This is how I've had to fashion to survive.
You are,
and it works.
Yeah, well, and that's been proven by just how many people resonate with you. Like your energy, as you say, and I'm an energy person as well, is magnetic. It's super positive, and although it's super refreshing to know that you can go home and have your sort of ups and downs, that's what you radiate, and that's ultimately what's helping people.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, but I
Yes.
wanted to ask you who your favourite poet is of all time, and your favourite poem. Are they the
this is when my mind goes blank and I pull out such a random selection. I was asked my favourite song recently and I said Despacito because I panicked and that's what came out. Mary Oliver is my favourite poet. I adore Mary Oliver because my poetry has to be message driven for me. I'm not interested in sort of dissecting and spending an hour cogitating over what possibly the poet meant. I want to hear, you know, a message. What were you trying to tell me? What did you want me to feel? And she brings everything back to nature, and that's really important for me because I am only doing well in my life if I bring everything back to nature on an hourly basis. Look at the sky, look at the moon, look at the sun, look at the trees, look at the grass. You will be fine if you constantly take the lead from nature. And I think my favourite poem might be Wild Geese by Mary Oliver.
I'll have to make a note of that.
I'd love to be able to recite it for you. That would be really impressive, but I can't.
Oh, I was about to have that. Yeah.
Sorry. But I know that I love it.
Yeah, I'm going to look that one up. And to finish, is there a poem that you just love that you have written that you could tell me now?
I think my favourites have got to be Joy Chose You and Joy Comes Back. In
Choose
my
one.
Joy series, Joy Chose You because it was the first.
Could you recite it for me?
I can. Joy does not arrive with a fanfare on a red carpet strewn with the flowers of a perfect life. Joy sneaks in. As you pour a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight hit your favourite tree just right. And you usher joy away because you're not ready for her. Your house is not as it should be for such a distinguished guest. But joy, you see, cares nothing for your messy home or your bank balance or your waistline. Joy is supposed to slither through the cracks of your imperfect life. That's how joy works. You cannot truly invite her. You can only be ready when she appears. And hug her with meaning because in that very moment, joy chose you.
Wow. I feel so privileged.
I'm just
Thank
glad
you.
I remembered it.
I'm sorry, I didn't intend to do that before I sat down, but I just felt that would be an amazing way.
Thank you for asking.
All we've got time for, but thank you so much.
It's
I know you
been
don't
a
do
joy.
too many of these things, so I feel really lucky to have been able to talk to you today.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Donna.
so much.
Thank
It's
you.
lovely to meet you.
You too.